And once again, welcome to our festival. Welcome to our 4th Advent Hearts Online Festival. I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Anthroposophical Society in Australia. And we have a wonderful program. Just a couple of speakers today. And we're going to look at the starry skies and the southern constellations and what it means to have Christmas as a community in the Southern Hemisphere. And then we'll be looking at having a little art contemplation on the starry Madonna, the Heavenly Madonna and Child, to close our event, our festival. Jo-anne Sarre is going to speak the verses for us. Semler is going to do the acknowledgement of country. Martin Samson is our keynote speaker, and I will be doing the art presentation. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you, Fiona, and hello, everybody. So we are on country wherever we are. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here in Ngunnawal country. Gulanyin, Dunanyang, Nalarawililin, Dunanyin, Ngunnawal Dara. And as we acknowledge the lands of, in this case, the Ngunnawal, or wherever you are, we can also recognize that traditional custodians have been on these lands forever, so to speak. They have come from the stars. So I think it's really apt today that we are going to be speaking to the stars. And it's not many generations back that the elders of this country spoke to the stars and were spoken to by the stars. So in that vein, I'd like to pay our respect to elders, past, present, and those who are emerging, and to all those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are amongst us in this special moment. I'd like to recognise the continuing contribution that traditional custodians and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of today make to shaping this country and who we are as a nation and as a people, and us individually in many instances. So thank you, and hello everyone. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. So without much ado, I would like to introduce Martin Samson, who is going to speak to us. He is our keynote speaker for today. Many of you, of course, know Martin. You might also know his book. He has written a book on the subject about which he is going to speak today. Martin is, of course, as well as an author, he is a theologian. He is also a researcher and PhD candidate. And he has a particular interest in searching for imaginations that include the forces of the southern cosmos and the community of people who live in this part of, I was going to say in this part of the cosmos, under the stars in this way. So without any more ado, Martin, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Stars once spoke to human beings. It is world destiny that they are silent now. To be aware of this silence can be pain for earthly humans. But in the deepening silence, there grows and ripens what human beings speak to the stars. To become aware of this speaking can become strength for the human spirit.
Thank you. Thank you, Jo-anne. Now we will have Martin. So I will stop the slides so you can. Martin.
Thanks, Jo-anne. Thank you, Fiona, and welcome everybody. I would like to try today for the next 40 minutes or so, give some pictorial imaginations, try and paint some pictures about what we here in the South or as part of the Southern Hemisphere can engage with from my own insights and research and readings of Rudolf Steiner's work with the festivals. And I read this wonderful quote the other day. He said in a sentence, "Truth is complicated." So we often desire very simple pictures to engage with. However, when it comes to an organism or like the human being, we know that we have to engage at ever deeper and more complicated pictures of how the whole organism works together physically, etherically, astrally, and spiritually. And it's true of the earth as well. And that verse that Jo-anne spoke, it was given in a way, well, on Christmas Day, it was a gift to Marie Sivers, and it depicts a situation in a lecture cycle. It's called the Spiritual Communion of Humanity. Just before that, he gives this man in the world of stars, or the human being in the world of stars, which depicts our condition in the modern world since the consciousness soul age of 1400, where we have lost our capacity to feel, and he encourages us to find a renewed relationship to nature, but not by going backwards into old traditions, but by going forwards into new levels of observation about the stars and the relationship of the sun, the moon, and the stars and the planets to the elemental forces of nature in relationship to our calendar year and the spiritual festivals around the seasons. So I'll be drawing upon the very well-known lecture cycle, the Four Seasons and the Archangels, and especially the fifth lecture, where he speaks very strongly about how we can build imaginations of how we can participate in celebrating and blessing the earth at this time of the year. And I'm going to focus only in on the Christmas imagination in the Southern Hemisphere, because otherwise we just get lost. So I would like to also acknowledge that there are things happening in the world around this December solstice, summer in some places, winter in others, dark night in others, bright day in others, and a wet or a dry season in the tropics. It's not just a traditional 4 seasons anywhere. In Australia, there are places where we have 7 seasons. So even trying to get the traditional 4 seasons to be more malleable, we have to develop a very open soul to these imaginations. And right now, there's the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn taking place, and its uniqueness, I suppose, this year, because it happens every 20 years. But for the last 200 years, those conjunctions have been happening in the Earth constellations and bringing the forces of death and wisdom into the material world. But from tomorrow, when the sun, in a certain form of astrology, enters into Capricorn, this conjunction will be in Aquarius. So for the first time, this conjunction will take place in an air sign. And over the next 200 years, these conjunctions will bring a seeding of an air culture from the earth culture that has been happening with the wisdom of Jupiter and Saturn. So it's a very important transition. And there's a very large ritual happening in Uluru to open up the solar plexus of the earth that is considered to be a conclusion of a creation ritual that took place at the dawn of time that never got completed. And they've asked people to hold that from afar, but that there's certain creation rituals happening tomorrow in the center of Australia. these are important aspects of how we can participate in the year this year. And I think we might have to just start the slides because I want to start talking now a bit about the actual imaginations. You may be aware, if you are or are not aware, thank you, Rudolf Steiner in these lectures in 1923 in the Four Seasons and the Archangels, and its sort of German title was The Archangels and the Cosmic Imaginations, and he talks about these four huge cosmic imaginations that take place at the four quarters. So if you can try to imagine the year, we have four quarters of the year with the center point being in each equinox and solstice. So the 21st of December, the 21st of March, the 21st of June, the 21st of September are kind of the cross around which these four seasons happen. And he talks about them in this particular way that is up on the screen at the moment, when in the Northern Hemisphere, so you're always very clear that in the Northern Hemisphere, these cosmic imaginations arise. They're not just there because it is now the 21st of December or Christmas. The cosmic imaginations don't come about naturally. They come about with these 6 aspects that are here. And he always, when you read the lecture cycle, he always speaks of these imaginations arising above the earth through particular processes. So there is a position that the earth has to the sun and the zodiac. So we are now moving through a particular segment of the year, which includes Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, maybe Aquarius, the next quarter. And there are forces that come to us because there is a position, and those forces come to the whole earth. They're the same everywhere on the earth, differentiated by the seasonal activity. So that's the second step. Every place on the earth has a seasonal elemental activity, and it's quite alchemical how he describes about it. It's probably the most alchemical lecture cycle Steiner gives, and I'm not going to go into the great detail of that. But these are different in 5 geographic zones. So you've got the tropics, you've got the polar regions, the north and the south polar regions. You've got 2 temperate zones. So you've got the northern temperate zone and the southern temperate zone, where maybe we get close to having 4 classic seasons. In the southern hemisphere, the temperate zones are not very, highly populated compared to the northern temperate zones. But these forces that come from the zodiac through the sun, under the guidance of archangels, and the alchemical activity of the season in each part of the earth, has an effect upon the earth's soul body and the breath of the earth. And the archangels work with that, and they have a particular gaze, a symbol, a gesture that he describes. But into that, there is human activity. So when the human being then at a particular time of the year speaks a verse, or holds a particular imagination, or as a community gather and has an Advent festival or a Christmas festival or a Hanukkah festival, it doesn't matter which festival it is, that is then inscribed into the cosmos. And he then says that creates an arising or a transforming of the cosmic imagination. And in my reading of that, I saw that the imaginations that Steiner describes, which I'll come to in a moment, has as the background some of the constellations of the stars that are in the northern hemisphere at that time of the year. So we will see in a moment that now at the December solstice, you have in the northern hemisphere constellations that give a picture of a father and a mother and a child being born. It's an old Greek mythology. But as we celebrate Christmas, there's an overlay. And this is at one level very unpopular for us to talk about cultural overlays. But we need to, and that's exactly what that verse that Jo-anne spoke about. In that particular lecture, he says we have to learn to give the stars their real spiritual names. So imbue them with an imagination that arises out of our festivals, but at the same time we are recreating. So there is an ancient blessing that comes to us from the stars, out of the pictures that come to us and engage with the various seasonal, physical seasons in different places of the earth. And through human festival, through human spirituality, the spirit of the earth brings about the birth of a new imagination. And he talks about the 4 imaginations as they go through the quarters of the year, guided by the 4 of the archangels. And each of these archangels is dedicated to a season. So the season of winter is Gabriel. So in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, in winter, the archangel Gabriel is gazing down upon the winter of the Northern Hemisphere and bringing about this, with the interaction of the sun forces, the earth's alchemy, the engagement of the human community, a content of consciousness in the form of a cosmic imagination. Now, the interesting question arises, what happens in the Southern Hemisphere? And the 5th lecture in that lecture cycle, Steiner actually spends the whole lecture describing the difference of what happens in the North and the South. And here I'd like to, just make a reference to the book that I wrote on the festivals in the Southern Hemisphere. And in the introduction, I say, I bring this thing that Steiner speaks at a certain point. He says that in the Southern Hemisphere, of course, everything is the other way around. That's one way that it's been translated. But if we go into a bit of more of a forensic translation, we see that he says that the conditions on the other side of the earth are set towards the north, entgegengesetzt. So you could say that's opposite if you want to translate it, but a literal translation means that the conditions of the festival are set towards the Northern Hemisphere. And I sort of make the comment that you can hear this in 2 ways. One, you can hear it as saying, we therefore have to celebrate the same festival at the opposite time of the year. In other words, Christmas is winter, so therefore we have to do Christmas in winter in the South at the opposite, set towards the North. Or you can hear it that the conditions for the festival are set towards or opposite to the North. In other words, the conditions for the festival in the South would be summer. So the conditions for the festival in the North for Christmas is winter, and the conditions for Christmas in the South is summer, and they are set towards each other. And there's a long lecture on that as to why that could be so. But I've taken over many years the lens to look at all the sayings by Rudolf Steiner, and then the constellations in the sky, that we have a whole Earth where the two hemispheres actually, the conditions are opposite, creating a whole. So we at the December solstice, I try to find how can we celebrate Advent or Christmas by finding how the winter of the North and the summer of the South complement each other. And in this lecture that Steiner gives, he talks about in the Southern Hemisphere that the archangel's work in the Southern Hemisphere is actually different to the work of the angel in the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm going to see what the next slide says. So he draws this picture in that lecture. That is a picture of the Earth in the center here. There's this Earth, and there's this face above the Earth, which is meant to be Uriel, the archangel, who in summer is gazing down upon the Northern Hemisphere. And then as the year goes on, he moves down. I'll just see if I can draw this. This angel moves down to the south and works from the south, now in the summer, so the 21st of December, through the earth. The work of the archangels in the south goes through the earth and literally fructifies. I know some people don't necessarily like me saying that word because it's one of my favorite words, but it fructifies the imagination of the south. So at any point, there's an angel in the north who carries the conscious imagination of the season. And from the south, there is another archangel, he says, who is working in the constitution of the human being. So the forces of the Southern Hemisphere build the constitution. Now, the way I try to explain that is pretty much like Waldorf education, is we don't introduce a consciousness process until the constitution is ready to receive it. If in the spiritual evolution of humanity, the festivals are developed and evolve with humanity, then the constitution must also transform. And the festivals in the Southern Hemisphere, or the forces of the Southern Hemisphere, are partly how we work together with constitution and consciousness together, but through the earth as well. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of ways to, I'm just going to turn that off and change the slide. There we go. So now if we look at this, we're going to try and get into looking at Uriel specifically. So Uriel is the archangel of summer, who now is in the Southern Hemisphere working into the constitution of the human being. So if we read this, I'll read this quote. So if we bring before our souls in the northern midsummer, so when Germany is, or Europe is in summer in June, July, the working of Uriel through nature into man, for his activity works into the forces of nature. We must picture the forces of Uriel streaming out in the cosmos, raying into the clouds. That was the picture I showed you before, the rain, the thunder and lightning, and raying also into the growth of plants. In winter, so now, 21st of December, after Uriel has made his way around the earth, his forces stream up through the earth and come to rest in our heads. And then these forces, which at other times are outside in nature, have the effect of making us citizens of the cosmos, for they actually cause an image of the cosmos to arise in our heads, illuminating us so that we may become possessors of human wisdom. And he develops in this lecture that each of these archangels, as they go from winter to spring to summer to autumn, work in different human systems. So Uriel in the summer works in our head, you know, renewing our capacity for sense perception, renewing the nervous system for thinking, renewing the wisdom within us. Then that moves to autumn, and Michael has another task in the skeleton and the muscles. And then Gabriel takes over and works in the digestive system, in the metabolic region. And then in springtime, Raphael will work in the rhythmical system. So the four systems of the human being, it has to do with that now. I'm not sure why that changed. Let's just go to this next slide here. So there we see Gabriel works into the nourishment, then moves on to Raphael in the healing, and the Uriel forces in our thoughts in midsummer, and the Michael forces of movement in autumn. This is the work of the archangels in the south, is to keep renewing, nourishing and transforming the human constitution so that the cosmic imaginations can become spiritually available to us. Now, one of the things that I try to get my head around is how do we know that these angels are different in the south? I'm just going to try and find this right here. This one in the southern imaginations, Steiner says the angels in the north, they have these great capacities for building pictures in the cosmos. In the south, they have these golden bowls or golden vessels like a chalice. And if you read in other places, the chalice is actually the whole southern cosmos. There's the whole southern cosmos. And the archangels hold this golden vessel for a time and use these forces, these cosmic forces of the chalice, to rejuvenate a particular system in the human being. And I've discovered since writing my book that there is a dynamic. I'll just get my little annotate. There is a dynamic. It goes, there is an artist, as the sun passes through, there's an artist in the starry world, which has a dynamic interaction. And then a new transformed symbolic instrument arises, and a new aspect of transformed human capacity arises. I'll show you what I mean by this. So the imagination arises when the artist within the human being in the Southern Hemisphere goes through a transformation and can create a new alchemical symbol. So now I'm going to skip over the September equinox and go down to the bottom here to the December solstice. And you can see that we've got Gabriel in the northern cosmos and Uriel in the human being. And as the season starts through Advent, the sun shines in the Southern Hemisphere through constellations that are known as the North American Indian. And this North American Indian stands in the cosmos and he is speaking with the birds. All the constellations around this human being who stands on the earth, the indigenous human being, is in conversation, especially with the birds. And then one of those birds is the phoenix. So you'll see that as we came out of the September equinox, the altar arose, and the altar is given to this human Indian being who is speaking with nature. These are pictures in the sky as we speak. And again, I'm trying to paint pictures, and one would have to go out into nature to look at these things and create a meditative imagination about these things. But there's a process in the Southern Hemisphere with the sun and the stars in the Southern Hemisphere that then allows, instead of from the altar, the next alchemical picture that arises is the phoenix. And the imagination that arises within the human being is that the indigenous person within us becomes an orator, a person who has magical morality in the spoken word. So right now, for example, in North America, the season has just started, the storytelling season. It's kind of like, it's the time of the year when we learn to speak words that have a magical morality. Steiner speaks of the magical morality of the human being as to having everything to do with the spoken word. So at this time of the year, our head system is being renewed, but a new imagination is starting to be born out of the Southern Hemisphere cosmos in relationship to the work of Uriel. I'm going to try and show that to you now diagrammatically. Let me see if I can turn that off and go back. So we can see I've done this. This is a diagram out of my book. We see that there's an imagination down here on the left here. I should take these out. Sorry, I think those are on the screen. I'll just get rid of these bits and pieces as we go so that it doesn't confuse us too much. Thank you for your patience. So we can see, I'm trying to show you that here in the north there's a consciousness, and in the south there's a constitution. Can you see my cursor? Okay, you can't see my cursor. I'm going to have to use the annotator. So there's the north here and the south, and then the imagination arises. So Gabriel is in winter. He has a mild, loving gaze, and the artistic imaginative expression is here. And we get the imagination that arises, a Mary and the child with the sun and moon bearing the spirit child to the earth. In the south, we're renewing the human head, human wisdoms, the forces of thought, sense, perception, the renewal of the head forces. And what happens is that the indigenous human being becomes the orator of magical morality. So we have these two imaginations that are working together because the human beings of the earth are celebrating Advent and Christmas. As we inscribe the content of the season, and as I said, these are not exclusive to Christian festivals. I believe that many different kinds of festivals contribute towards this. But I'm starting to work with this idea that we need a double imagination. Now, Steiner does not speak of these Southern Hemisphere imaginations. This is work that I've been doing over many years to try and work with the Southern stars to see how this being that is within us, this indigenous human being, every one of us, as we heard at the welcome, is that every one of us has a relationship to the earth somewhere. We are indigenous. But that indigenous self can transform into finding the capacities that we have as wonderful capacities to use the artistry of the spoken word, oration, to be culturally involved and bring the imaginations that come out of the cosmic imaginations through the vessel, through the golden vessel of our humanity. So I'm just going to say a little bit more, and then I'm going to just get rid of these. Sorry, erase these things so that we can move on to other slides. Which way do I go with these slides now? So here there is a picture of how this works. You can again see on the slide that we've got the stars as the sun moves through these. In the north, these are the Northern Hemisphere constellations, and these are the Southern Hemisphere constellations. We see that there is Cassiopeia and Andromeda, as Andromeda is here as we come into Christmas, so the mother and the daughter, which then of course Pegasus and the foal is another layer of the mother and the daughter picture. We see the American Indian surrounded by the crane, the toucan, the peacock, the eagle, the swan, and eventually the phoenix arises. So we see over here, Uriel has received the golden bucket. Okay, Uriel receives the golden bucket, and at the end the golden bucket is handed over to Michael. This is a kind of a picture of what one could see. This is a sort of a diagram of what we could see if we went outside tonight and looked into the sky. We would see some of these pictures, but the idea is that that's how they would work together. Gabriel is above, and Uriel is in the south at the human side. So you've got the cosmos, oh, sorry, and the human side. I'm not very good at drawing with a pointer. So I'm going to have to, sorry, go back on that. Oh, sorry, other way, and remove those things. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to talk about, was just to try and get a pictorial imagination. I know it's a lot of information to take in and it's quite intellectual at first, but the method would be to take these imaginations and work with them each season to say, what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere that's coming around the whole Earth? Steiner says at this time of the year, if we take ourselves outside of the Earth, we can look back on the whole Earth, and we can see how at this time of the year, 21st of December, and the months around that, all the souls who are to enter into the Earth, incarnate into the moon sphere, waiting for conception. All the children who will be born through 2021 now enter. And he says this is the annual fructification. So another Christmas season of how something spiritual enters into the physical, all happen at this time of the year. So what's happening spiritually in the renewal of our capacity to speak, to work with the head forces, balancing what comes through the wisdom of Gabriel and the birth of the child through the mother as a spiritual imagination that transforms, so to say, the old imaginations from the stars. So just a little recap is that there's the old imaginations of Cassiopeia and Andromeda, and through the alchemical processes on the earth and the celebration of Christmas, a new cosmic imagination arises. I'll just get rid of these and go back to that so you can see that. Here we've got in the north the Mary and the child with the sun and moon. If you look at the left-hand column, Mary and child with the sun and moon bearing the spirit child to the earth. And then in the south, the indigenous human being becomes opens the capacity of the word to speak the moral imaginations. These two work together. There's a whole lot more that could be said. Read my book if you want more details, and wait for the next few years until the next volume comes out. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I wanted to go today, to try and give people a picture to try and get this picture that in the Southern Hemisphere, we have complementary pictures to that of the North. They're not the same pictures, but they definitely complement each other from the point of view of consciousness and constitution as part of how we participate in the evolution of consciousness. Obviously, there's a whole problem about how we then generate festivals that don't just have Eurocentric and winter images. We need to do a lot of work about creating summer-based imagery to complement the winter imagery. The winter imagery isn't the problem. It's the lack of summer imagery that we need to struggle with. That's how I try to work. So that's my thoughts for today. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Martin. So we have these quite amazing imaginations. I don't know how you feel with that, but it really takes you out into a kind of an expanded cosmos to start. And anybody who, of course, has been watching the stars recently will already have some part of them out there. Fortunately, we have both Martin's book and the video that we can go back over this and think about it and carry these imaginations with us throughout the Christmas season and throughout the...
There is a YouTube channel, Fiona, as well.
Yeah. Yep. I've actually put that on the website. Yeah, I think I've got a link to that. Yeah. So I'll make sure there's a link to the website, the YouTube channel as well. All right, thank you very much, Martin. So to move along, I'm actually now myself going to carry on with this theme and take, however, quite a particular part of it. The Mary, the Madonna and the Child, with who are bringing the spirit child, to use what Martin had on his slides, bringing the spirit child down to the earth. So I'm just going to, where are we? Start the slides again. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, which Martin has already given you a little highlight, a preview of one. And we're going to look at how the Madonna and Child, the Virgin and Child, move in the medieval times, or the early medieval, from being experienced in the heavenly sphere and gradually descend to earth, and yet still remain completely ensouled. And as a kind of a path to show that even the Madonna and Child, they are not fixed. It is not a fixed that the child was born once, that the Christ was born once, but the Christ is always being born every year. The Christ child is born again into the world, and once again we go on this wonderful cycle through the earth, through the constellations, and through the earthly destiny of both the Madonna and the Christ. And humanity, of course, goes with them. Stoner speaks to us about there being two Jesus children, two Madonna, two holy families. One, as we see in the Matthew Gospel, is what Steiner calls the Solomon stream, the kingly stream of star wisdom. And in the other, as Luke describes in his Gospel, is the Nathan stream, the priestly stream. And the two families, if you read Emil Bock's book on childhood of Jesus, gives a beautiful picture of comparing the very different destinies and the qualities of them. I'm going to now just look in some medieval art at how we see elements of this. So we have here in the first slide, the Madonna and Child with John the Baptist and Saint Catherine. And we see very typical of the era of early medieval, and this is the 14th century. This is from an artist from Siena, and we have what strikes us immediately is the experience of the gold of the of the celestial divine light is brought to us through literally gold leaf, not just gold paint, but gold leaf. And then we see the Madonna, who is wrapped in blue. And on her blue robe, she is covered in stars. So we really have here the heavenly Madonna. And one can talk about the symbolism of the blue or the symbolism of the gold, but we want to look more at the experience. And in the experience of the blue robe that enfolds the Virgin, we have, as what Steiner tells us, that in blue, we experience the shining of the soul. So we see the shining of the soul enfolding the Virgin Mary. And the child, who is very upright, the Christ child, which is very typical of this priestly, of the star wisdom, of the kingly stream of star wisdom, where the child is upright and gazing into the face of the Madonna, here's the Lord of wisdom, of the starry wisdom, and he is wrapped in, we could say it's red, which Steiner tells us we experience. In red, we experience the shining of the living, or it has something of a peach blossom colour, where we experience the living image of the soul. So we have these two experiences through the colours, with the soul in its different colorings against the celestial divine golden light of the spiritual world. In this next one, we have also from Siena, a little bit later, the Virgin and Child with angels. And we have again this beautiful gold background, and the gold touches the child and touches the Virgin, and there is the star on her blue robe. But this time we have the Madonna herself has got the red robe of the luster of the living, enfolded in the blue of the where we experience the luster or the shining of the soul. So the soul, the blue enfolds the red, and this is very typical of how we see the Madonna is so often, as we go into Renaissance, we have the red and of the robe and the blue of the soul that is always enfolds. And those of you, of course, and I'm sure many of you have done this many times, when you have painted blue, you're always being asked to paint blue as an enfolding in a kind of a B gesture. And this is because this is really how, this is the true experience of blue, of the soul blue. And in here, of course, we have the child who is in fact all robed in gold, with a little carrying the little sign in Latin saying, "I am the light of the world." So this star, heavenly light is embodied in the Christ as who bring the Spirit as part of this embodiment of the Spirit child who will come to earth. But in this point, in the 14th century, early 15th century, is still experienced by humanity in the heavenly sphere. When we come on to the next one again, we're now starting to come into the world. So we have here the flight to Egypt. This is a tiny little illustration from a French book of the hours. And we now have the starry sky, the blue sky appears, but with the stars, the star wisdom being shone down on the holy couple and the Christ child. Now this is still in the kingly stream, I should say, because we know that in the Gospel of Matthew, it's the Solomon child and the Solomon family who flee to Egypt. But what I particularly love about this image, which, and as I said, it's very tiny, is the way you see, and I'm not going to use the annotation, but if you look closely, you see how the Christ child's face is pressed right up against the Madonna's face. And those of you who are familiar with Orthodox Christianity and their icons will recognize this as the, this is very similar to the what's called the Eliosa Madonna, the Madonna of loving kindness, where in great contrast to the Christ child of the Solomon stream, who is really the kingly, sitting back, that we see that this beautiful devotional, extraordinary love of the child pressing up against the cheek of the Madonna. So we're in the world now, but still in the world, but they are not yet of the world. We have the angels, we have the trees, we have the blue sky. We go on now into the early Renaissance. The Madonna of the book. The angels disappear, the starry skies disappear, and we have still the star on the blue cloak enfolding the Madonna, and the gold halos around the two, the Virgin and the Child. But now we see in the hands of the child, he is holding 3 gold nails and the golden crown of thorns, prefiguring now the Passion of Christ, the event of Golgotha. So we've come from the first image where we have this still in the heavenly wisdom personified by the child and the Madonna, very much in the heavenly sphere and with the gold background, and this gradual descent into the earthly world. And not only now with the Christ waiting to descend as the Spirit child on Christmas Eve, but now already prefiguring his death on the cross. And for our last one, Raphael, the Alba Madonna. This beautiful circular, it's called tondo format, the circular painting. Completely in the world. The Madonna is now on the ground, completely in the world, and the child and the young St. John the Baptist all gaze at the cross. So we have again this transition from the previous one where there was still the heavenly wisdom was expressed in the motifs on the painting, have now disappeared, and you might say that spiritual light, that spiritual star, has now completely in the world and is looking already now completely towards the Passion of Christ. And yet still the Madonna is the beautiful rose red robe of the luster, or where we see the shining of the living, and enfolded in the blue, the shining of the soul, really enfolding the whole picture. So we have there this series of imaginations from the starry wisdom of the heavenly Madonna, and then the descent of the Spirit, the star wisdom, the descent of the Spirit child, and the heavenly Madonna down into the earthly sphere, and engaging in with the earthly sphere and looking already to the passion of Christ. And I find that this, in a way, this circular tondo form, we really see that experience. It's not only the cosmic form of the sphere, but we're looking again, it embodies that cycle of the year, the cycle of the movement of the cosmic wisdom that comes to earth and goes through the death on the cross and will then go on to be Christ, the Lord of the heavenly hosts upon the earth. So to finish up here, I would like to ask Jo-anne to speak the Christmas verse.
Thanks, Fiona. So I'll just do the stopping of the video so people can really focus on what the words share with us. Come, child, into our hearts and still the storm made by our selfish wishes wrestling there, and weave again the fabric of humanity out of thy light, thy life, thy loving fire.
So this brings to a close our festival. There's a couple of references here which I will put up on the community notes board, and of course you can also find them if you watch the video. And I would like to say thank you to everyone who has taken part in these online Hearts online gatherings throughout the year and have supported this venture, this initiative, as we like to call them, who's been part of these. And to wish everybody, especially those who find themselves, like me, suddenly in lockdown over Christmas, perhaps who are going to be spending Christmas alone, that everyone has a peaceful and light-filled Christmas. I'd like to thank Hannah for her work over the year, with her bring us always into the remembrance and the recognition of the country that we stand on, and to Martin today for this wonderful lecture. But before we go, I really think it would be lovely if people could, I noticed virtually everybody's got their video off, which I realise makes perhaps more comfortable for you, but it would be really wonderful if you could all turn your videos on and perhaps wish everybody happy Christmas. That would be really nice just to finish off. I'll even let everybody unmute themselves now.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy summer festival.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and particularly to Susan in Singapore.
Ah.
There we are international.
Merry Christmas, Alexa.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. I cannot switch my video on. All the best for Christmas and the coming year.
Yes, thank you.
Merry
The
Christmas.
best for 2021. My goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Thanks. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fiona, for bringing this together.
losing them.
Let's have more in 2021
Mhm.
and come together in person, we hope.
Yes. Light-filled days.
Night, everyone.
Good
And
night.
I will
Go do the word.
Bye.
Bye.
Lovely to see you.
Happy Christmas.
Yeah.
bye everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona.
And
Thank you so much.
Hannah. Thank
Bye.
you.
Very good. Lovely.
Very well.